Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're talking about my episode 4 review of Hard Knocks training camp with the Oakland Raiders. So, without further ado, let's get right into it. Hey, everybody, how's everyone doing? Hope everyone's doing great. Hope everybody's fantasy teams are doing great. But today, we're talking about Hard Knocks, like I usually do on Tuesday nights, the weekly episode, and what I thought about the episode. Now, similar to every single episode prior, the Hard Knocks episode will begin with a fiery speech, but this week it wasn't with John Gruden. You know, John Gruden the last couple weeks has given some pretty motivational speeches. This time it was from the defensive line the defensive line coach of the Oakland Raiders, and he was really tearing into his guys. You know, and it was interesting because he was getting after them. It was a call to action because. As we all know, since Khalil Mack has left the Oakland Raiders, their defensive line hasn't been great. Yes, they've addressed it by spending a first-round pick, the 4th overall pick, in fact, on the Clemson defensive lineman that they've picked up. But their defensive lineman defensive line core has not been as talented as it has been in years past, and they need to step up in order to find success. Right, the defensive line is going to dictate a lot of the defensive success. So as of right now. Him getting after his defensive lineman, it's perfectly fine. It's just the way that he went about doing it was a little weird. When he was completely getting after these players and saying there are some of you in this room that I don't like the way you play football, plain and simple, and you're not man enough to figure it out yourself. I was like, damn, coach, relax. You're supposed to teach these guys. Sure, they're supposed to be NFL ready, but if they're not cutting it, cut them. What are we waiting for? Why are we ripping into guys? Just cut them, get them out of there. It's not a big deal. But either way, I mean, it's a call to action. It fires me up to an extent, but at the same time, none of the defensive linemen were looking at the coach. They were all some guy was biting his nails, some guy was chewing on something, some dude was hoodied up and hiding in the corner. Nobody wanted to be the target of the rant. And it kind of it stood out to me. But either way, it starts us off with a pretty high tempo of, we got to get down to business, okay? And if you're not going to step up, eventually you're not going to be on this roster. Unfortunately, throughout this entire episode, there were no cuts. I thought by this time around, we'd have a couple players get cut, or at least the looming threat of one of those guys walking around the facility asking for playbooks. But considering it was the week in which they went up to Winnipeg in Canada, play against the Green Bay Packers, there really wasn't much of anything at home. So they basically packed up at Napa. They went up to Canada, and then next week they're going to be cutting down for the 53-man roster. So how did this episode pretty much go? To be honest, a lot of it just had to do with the Canada game. So besides the fact that they were prepping to play against the Packers, they followed Luke Wilson, like we mentioned before in weeks prior, the tight end, formerly of the Seahawks and formerly of the Lions. He is a Canada-born NFL tight end, and to be honest, he's going back home to play. So that's always fun. So they followed him. They followed the tight ends room as they've done in many weeks prior. But interestingly enough, they didn't follow any of the defensive linemen throughout this episode. Sure, we could start off with a fiery speech from the D-line coach, but then we're not going to follow it up by following one of those guys. I know they mentioned, or they went over and they had a couple scenes with Max Crosby, who had got a couple screws in his hand that he showed us. But other than that, none of the guys that were playing really got much time until the end of the episode. But I really anticipated them getting after the defensive line and showing us a couple new players there. Because that's the thing about Hard Knocks. We want to see new players. We want to see different dynamics and what kind of guys are still trying to make rosters, especially for the Raiders. I mean, as of right now, after this week, they're 3-0 in the preseason, yet we don't really have a pretty good grasp outside of a couple players, on their roster that is potentially going to make it. Otherwise, we're just we're sitting in the dark because they really haven't introduced us to too many players. But either way, they went over the tight end group. They followed Luke Wilson for a good amount of time. Oh, Canada. Oh, sweet Canada. And then they followed Darren Waller, who, as of right now, I mean, he's set to be the number one tight end for this team, plain and simple. He didn't even have to play in the preseason game this week because he's a starter, plain and simple, and they don't need him getting injured. They need him healthy and ready for the entirety of the season. Mentally, physically, they gotta get him prepared, and I think he is. Other than that, the funniest thing that I saw was or that was in this episode was the knock on wood if you're with me, right? Interestingly enough, they had an entire montage on that knock on wood if you're with me kind of thing with John Gruden, and it was pretty cool. I thought the editing work on that was awesome, and it fired me up. And it's hilarious because they were just keying in on all of the different sayings and mannerisms of John Gruden and what he specifically likes to do. Just like me, at the end of the day, it is what it is, bada boom, anything like that. I always say that stuff consistently. You'll see it on this channel very often, or you'll hear it on this channel very often. But they were pretty much just kind of giving a jab to John Gruden this week and just following his little sayings and mannerisms, which was hilarious. But it worked perfectly. It worked in seamlessly with training camp, people hitting the bags, getting fired up, practicing, and it was enjoyable. I like that. Just I'm with it. I like it. Other than that, there really wasn't much else in the U.S., nothing training camp-wise. We had a couple interactions between Derek Carr and John Gruden, but nothing too special. Obviously, just it's coming down to the wire. The 53-man roster is going to be built. One of the players that they did introduce to us before we went over to the Canada game was Jason, Cabinda. Jason Cabinda, a linebacker, and they introduced him by saying last year, undrafted, did not make the roster, but eventually was signed to the roster midway through the season due to injuries. So he was added on, and he's going into his second year as an all-pro, or not all-pro, just a pro in the NFL, and he's still trying to make a roster spot within this team. So they showed him at practice. Sure, he was struggling in zone coverage, but he's going to have a pretty big opportunity this week against the Packers in order to try to secure that job going into the future, right? So they followed him, his story. They introduced his mother and their descent from Cameroon. So all of that, trying to give us another player to root for. And 100% we're going to do that, right? Because these guys are all awesome. It doesn't matter who you show us on Hard Knocks. We're going to root for said player because we want to. We want to see these people succeed. We don't want any of them to fail at all. Not at all. We want them to succeed. And it's enjoyable when they introduce new players as they did this week. So Jason is a middle linebacker, so we'll talk about him a little more as the preseason game starts. But they got up to Winnipeg, and the whole question was the field issues, which was I didn't even hear about this, right? It's insane how the field issues were so bad by having to take the goalpost, because obviously in the CFL they put the goalposts in the front of the goal line. Comparatively, and then they have like a 20-yard end zone, something like that. The whole field was jacked up. They had to play on an 80-yard field. They moved in the pylons, so where the end zone was from the goal line to the 10. What the heck? That's unbelievable. No kickoffs. You start the ball at the 25-yard line. That's literally how the NFL wants to go in the future. Like Roger Goodell has tried to pass the rule of banning kickoff returns. That's why in the last couple of years, if you let the ball go out the back of the end zone or you take a touchback, you're going to get the ball at the 25-yard line because they want to reward you for not returning the ball because of how many concussions take place on kickoff and kickoff return. They found that is probably one of the most dangerous spots, so they want to eliminate kickoff and kickoff return, which is an exciting aspect of football in general, right? Field position, depending on whether your defense or your return team can dictate. I mean, it makes a huge difference in the game of football. So it was just a little weird that those kind of field issues took place. The Packers didn't even want to play. Like Coach what's his name? God, what's the head coach's name for the Green Bay Packers? I was gonna say LaFleur. I don't know if that's from Dodgeball. Have you guys seen Dodgeball? Peter LaFleur. That's what's coming to my mind. God, what is that guy's name? Now I gotta look it up because it's probably gonna be LaFleur. Head coach. Yeah, it is LaFleur. Matt LaFleur. God, I think I knew it. I had curiosity killed the cat. Curiosity killed the Andrews. So anyway, LaFleur came over to Gruden. They just said, "What's up?" And then LaFleur began to complain. Yeah, do you have any news on the end zone? He's like, "Do you guys want to play or not?" And he's like, "Yeah, we'll play." It's like, okay, geez, like, holy moly, why are you being such a bit? I don't know, just really weird. But either way, let's talk about the preseason game because that's really the entire episode. It's all about the remaining players making the roster. And who do they mainly focus on? Obviously, the quarterback competition between Mike Glennon and Nathan Peterman. Keelan Doss was a main focus. Like I mentioned, Jason Kabinda was one of the focuses on trying to make this roster plain and simple. So going into that, Nathan Peterman outplayed Mike Glennon by far. And the way that it's looking and the way that the episode began to progress, Coach Gruden loves Nathan Peterman. Even on the headphones on the sideline, he was saying, guys, I'm going to show you just how good this player is. We're going to put him in, and Nathan Peterman's going to surprise you. And boy, did he do that. I mean, 2 touchdown passes, outplaying Mike Glennon. And the real question is, are they going to keep 3 quarterbacks? I know a lot of organizations like to have 3 quarterbacks in the quarterback room in order to just make sure that if in case an injury is to occur, at least you already have your backup and you don't have to go fishing for one. So at the end of the day, I really do believe that they're going to keep all 3 of these quarterbacks on roster. But who's going to be that second quarterback? It's just fun competition at this point. And I think there's a good chance that Nathan Peterman, after this last performance, could eventually take that. I mean, we know, yes, Nathan Peterman is known for throwing 4 interceptions in a game, but I think that's past him now. I think as soon as I start, talking about it and everybody else stops talking about it, which is kind of hard, but after we do, it's just going to be, an afterthought for Nathan Peterman, because hopefully his career can, shift the other way. That's what we're hoping for. But other than Nathan Peterman, targeting Keelan Doss is probably the greatest thing for him. Having Keelan Doss on the field with him, who is also another one of John Gruden's favorites, it's only helping him. Keelan Doss, small school guy, UC Davis, California school. I mean, goodness gracious, he is so damn good. The catches that this guy was making. Now, I don't want anybody to get too out of control and say Keelan Doss is going to end up being the starter for this team soon enough. That's not going to happen. You still have AB, you still have Tyrell Williams, but for the future, a guy like this being in the organization and eventually learning from guys like that have so much experience in the league thus far, it only helps in terms of depth and building that. You have Renfro, who really doesn't get too much TV time in terms of Hard Knocks, but he's there to eventually play that slot position. But I think they've got definitely some talented players, especially a lot of talented undrafted rookies, which John Gruden brought up. After the preseason game in a press conference, they even asked him, like, are you going to keep all 3 quarterbacks? He's like, listen, I might even keep 5 undrafted free agent rookies. I don't know what's going to happen. We're keeping the best 53 guys, and definitely Keelan Doss has proven far and away that he deserves to be on this roster. And for as much as John Gruden really loves him, he's going to be on roster. There's no way he doesn't make this roster. And the same thing with Peterman. I think both of them have a really. I mean, they're pretty much a lock at this point, in my opinion. Outside of that, they were able to win. They're 3-0 this offseason or this preseason. Game-winning clutch field goal at the end, which is fantastic. Keep the morale and the intensity at a high level. I mean, that's pretty much what you want. But here's the thing. Again, it is the preseason. Next week, it's all about backups, being able to make the team, plain and simple. That's what it's going to be. This next preseason game is just, this last preseason game is similar to next week. It's just all about the backups. We're not putting in any starters. It is up to you. You're going to be given the opportunity. Can you act upon it and win the job outright? And we're just going to have to wait and see. Jason Kabinda, he made a couple mistakes here and there, but at the end of the day, the guy was getting to the ball. Usually you want 11 hats on the ball. He, as a middle linebacker, was calling the defense, adjusting, and getting his hat on the ball every single time. And that's what you want to see. You want to see a middle linebacker being the captain of that defense, the leader there. And he pretty much demonstrated that. So hopefully we can follow him going into next week. Keep an eye out on him. We kept an eye on Luke Wilson, who didn't play great, but it is what it is. There's a pretty deep tight end room there. So if in fact he gets cut, I'm not going to be surprised. But with the experience he has underneath his belt already, I mean, he's been in the league for what? Probably 6, maybe 5, 6 years, 7 potentially. The guy, I think he has a better shot more than the other tight ends that we don't often follow with the Oakland Raiders. Other than that, what else did we see? After they finished the Canada game, it was back to California. AB looking healthy. His grievance with the helmet issue was denied again. The thing that I heard the other day was that AB is trying to get a custom helmet built for him. There was a couple companies like Shut Right Out that were coming to him and saying, hey, listen, we will make you a custom helmet. You just got to come in and we'll make it perfect for you and comfortable for you. So, and hopefully the NFL passes it and we're set. And hopefully that they're taking steps forth on that, because AB he's just way too valuable of a player for this team. I mean, AB makes or breaks this team in 2019. If AB can have one of those seasons where he's scoring similar to last year, 15 touchdowns, and he can make Derek Carr a better quarterback, we're going to see a different offense. I mean, a way different offense than we did last year. And that's exactly what they're hoping for. And I think it all starts with AB. And I know you guys believe the same thing. So that's pretty much it. I mean, outside of next week, the season finale being just everybody getting cut, or people making rosters with their performances, there really wasn't much else with this episode. So I don't really want to drag on anymore. Oh, the funniest thing of this episode, by far the funniest thing, at the end, after the episode ended, and then the credits starts to roll. They go back to the defensive line coach, and they were talking, and he was saying, listen, guys, did you buy my gummy bears? And they're like, listen, we don't want to buy junk. He's like, listen, all I wanted was gummy bears, plain and simple. Just get them from me, I'm perfect. And then one of the other defensive linemen's like, he says something of a nature like, listen, no, what? Oh God, I'm trying to remember. If you saw it, then you'll know what I'm talking about. But they zoom in on one of the defensive linemen just eating a fruit roll-up in the corner. Like, he had no clue that the cameras were on him. It was probably one of the funniest moments I've ever seen in the last couple weeks. Oh my, it was probably better than the impersonations that guy was doing last week. By far one of the funniest. So if you haven't checked that out, try to find it. I guarantee you it's on Twitter somewhere. This defensive lineman was eating a fruit roll-up in the corner. It was and he was just pounding this. Oh my, it was so funny. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you're new to the channel, typically fantasy football. So if you want fantasy football advice, it's everywhere. So click on the channel, subscribe, like the video, and until next time, which will be next week for the season finale, thank you everybody for watching, and I'll see you guys. Peace.